I'd just like to take a quick moment here at the start of this part of the series to talk about tools. I'm a huge fan of my 12-volt Bosch, which is way too much for doing things like building RC cars. But I love it. I mean, I used an exact version of this to build a deck. So clearly it's too much power. But it can do cool things like it's just spin it down on the end. This one doesn't have any method of retention, so you just hold it there, hit reverse, and just spin the ends off. I can't get enough of that. Then, second perhaps only to the Bosch, are these guys. I call them my fingers because these are my actual fingers, and say I want to get one of those out of there. I'm not messing around. Like I got one. It doesn't help that it's 47 degrees in here. But now if I want to get one, I just go like that. So any bin I have, like if I need to get 3mm out, I get to go in there. And these, I can get ones off the top, but it's horrible. So fingers. Then my newest and most favorite, and the one that I'm ashamed that it took me this long to put together, is this little guy, little two-parter. We got this little special friend here because if there's a thing that I hate, it's hollow balls. Because once again, giant fingers, don't want to get them out. For years, I would just kind of press on the angle with that. And I don't know how many times I got my fingers caught in the pliers. So now the end goes there. That goes like that. We get our tiny hammer. And it's out. And there he is. And it can fill up with them too. I can get like 10 of them in there. So during this video, I guarantee, whether it's in stop motion or full speed, you will see me using this perhaps more than I would like to, because I'm sure I will mention why at some point. So on to the part where I build stuff. Just a quick update on the off-camera stuff before we get into this one. I cleaned up the work from last time. I made the stiffening plate that I had planned on making. As it turned out, the spacers needed to be significantly higher, and I took these guys to the sander and kind of profiled them. I actually took quite a bit of material off of them, and now it sits pretty much perfectly level. I'm really happy with that height. It looks high when you're looking through the fender like that, but I tested it with all manner of other mounts, and as with most crawlers, it could be that much lower, at 8mm, and I would rather have magnets than have the body 8mm lower. Time will tell if the body gets flappy down here. I don't think it will. Managing to get those back on means that this guy can be reinstalled, which is excellent because I got the JX4-10s, got those three. That is not for what's going to happen today. Today will be links to get the axles roughed into place. And if I can get those roughed in, I might be able to get to dropping the gearbox in, because the gearbox will need some work, because TRX4 drive shafts only fit TRX4 stuff. And if I do get to that, I will explain why, but I am definitely going to make every effort to keep this one a bit more brief than part one. So I'm just going to go straight into the time lapse and get this thing rough together. I'm going to slow this time lapse down a little bit from its usual speed to give me a second to rant about hollow balls and how, much like in the cycling industry, there's no such thing as a standard in bottom brackets. Apparently in the RC industry, there's no such thing as a standard in hollow balls, because you've got at least 4 or 5 different diameters and 5 or 6 different widths. So if you have like the balls that will fit in a 10th scale rod end like these, you've got 5.6, 5.7, and 5.8 millimeter around, and then you've got 7 millimeter, 7.2 millimeter, 7.5 millimeter, 8 millimeter. You have all these different widths. So what happens is when they get mixed together, then nothing fits. So at this point, every bit as rough and ugly as one would anticipate. Clearly the lower links have not been dialed out far enough. We got a little backwards shock action. Caster actually looks pretty good. Due to the relationship of the panhard mount on the VS410 and where the panhard mount sits on the Traxxas axle, we've got a steering link that's a good bit longer, and they're not quite sitting at the same angle. Once again, as with most Vanquish stuff, it's very specific as to what type of servo horn it wants. This one is just thrown on here, but I can get full throw, which is good. The relationship angle between the, I mean, you can see narrower there and wider here. So that horn needs to be shorter, like an 18 millimeter horn. I don't know if I have anything that short. These will get dialed out more, you know, because everything here is just test fit. But the axle sits pretty straight. It has about as much bump steer as one would expect from chassis mounted steering. I can probably reduce that a little bit. Maybe spacing the, I don't know if spacing the panhard mount out to lengthen the link will help. It might. I'm actually surprised at how much steering throw it'll get without the drag link hitting. But it sits okay, and it gets almost full travel before the panhard bottoms out. But amazingly, it doesn't look like there's any panhard interference with the servo horn, which, I mean, these things tuck together so tight, there usually is. But the front end is at very least roughed together with a selection of, that's Traxxas, that's Element. These are axial, got axial ends on most of it, got some SSD ends on those. Whatever we can get to fit. The shocks had to be slung upside down because the shock collars basically hit. These are SCX-10-3 shocks, which the length is pretty good. They are the same length as an Element shock, but they have more droop. So I'm all about droop. The travel seems okay. It's not binding even with the I mean, the shock angle is close, but it's easy to fix, and I haven't started making any links yet. So the panhard and steering link issue will be addressed, but before I get to any of that, I'm going to just do the same thing again for the rear. I know what balls to use now, what hollow balls, so I'll get the shocks hung and try to get them straight, line up the axle, and then I'll have a better idea of which links to rough in to get it to sit. And hopefully, at least today, I can get this thing sitting on its axles. And during this one, the hollow ball knockout tool is front and center for a big part of it because of the aforementioned, the Vanquish wants 7mm wide hollow balls. And most of what I have are 7.5 millimeter, which is what on TRX4s and most everything else. So it was calipering and knocking and calipering and knocking. Unsurprisingly, I grossly overestimated the number of specific rod ends that I had. I have 8 of the axials, which are what's being used here for the front lowers. And then I used 2 of them for, I think, for the steering link. So I was too short for doing the uppers. And really, because some people might not be aware of. So you've got curved rod ends from all the different makes. This is an axial Capra. It's about a middle level of curve. The Traxxas curved rod ends, slightly less curved, and the ones from the SCX-102 are slightly more curved. So I'm trying not to mix and match. I figure based on what's in the bin, the final will be the Element ends, because I like the amount of curve they have. I like how slender they are. I have a lot of them, and they because they're slender, they don't want to interfere. You can see here that the curve on the axial one is way too much. So I happen to have these big old Lunsfords that are up on top. You can tell by that amount of angle they are too long, but I think the rears, the shock placement looks pretty good. Truck sits all right. It's got obviously more travel in the rear because it has no panhard interference. It'll go all the way up in the rear. As it sits right now, I measured it a moment ago. The wheelbase is about 12 3/8, just under 12 1/2. So that'd be what? Yeah, in that 313-ish millimeter range, give or take. The linkage cables look like they will reach. I just have to figure out the mechanism to attach them, because on the TRX4 there's a little gantry guy with 2 spots, and screws hold these down, and then these just attach to the servos. I have the rest of the bits, but I mean, I think it looks pretty good. Let me slap some wheels on it real quick so I can see how it at least roughly sits. Just a small aside, this is what Santa brought this year. So it's currently making some parts for Ironsides the Defender, a new rear bumper, and a mount for the 1080 speed control. So my first attempt at 3D printing, and it seems to be going, I mean, so far so good. This thing isn't lightning fast, but it did its test print flawlessly. So hopefully I can teach myself how to do the software, and I can make the mounts for the diff servos on this fellow, which would be great. So sometimes it's just fun to watch. But anyway, I'm gonna get back to links. Wheels on tells us many things. I think the final ride height, it will probably sit right around there. Should be quite good. But now with wheels on it, I can really tell. Rear lowers good. Front lowers too short. Front upper seems okay. Rear uppers actually not too bad, because it puts the pinion angle, I mean, it's a little steep. That we're gonna have to shorten that up. Front looks good, but when you look fore to aft, so we've definitely got more tire on this side than this side, which means panhard is too long. Gonna have to pull that in. I've got some space on that rod to pull it in a little more to try to shift this over. I mean, it looked fine. You know, no tires on it. Then you get tires on it, and it's quite a bit over. I'd say maybe 10 millimeters to that side. Yeah, the bump steer looks noticeable, which is indicative of that panhard link being too long. And then the rear links, nothing is properly adjusted. So it's the same thing, but to the other direction. So if we go right off of there, we're just to the middle of the innermost tread block. And if we go right here, we're at about the middle of the second tread block. So not as significant in the rear, and that's simply a matter of the links not being the same lengths. So everything is pushed over just a little bit. These shocks have basically almost no oil left in them. That's fine. I think at most they're probably placeholders, as I think desert lizards being so skinny should definitely, like, that collar is tight. These shock towers were never intended to have SCX-10 3 shocks on them. But with the gearbox dropped into place, the front and rear pinion angles, not bad, considering none of this was ever designed to go together. And the rear output on a TRX4 gearbox is over there, where the motor will be in this. So it's not going to have the sexiest rear driveline angle, but it should be fine. I don't think it's going to bind. And as far as body goes, now seeing it with tires, I'm glad that the body sits higher. It's really going to need the body holes drilled and the body mounted to know how bad the rubbing will be. I think, like, I want the front further forward, but I want maybe I can, well, I want to keep that shock angle as straight as possible, but it looks like I need to pull the rear in to about 12 inches to get that rear tire centered. Like I say, it's not critical, and I don't think it's going to rub under full compression, so that's not going to matter. The front is so stiff right now because of the bad panhard angle. See, I think it will get some rub at full lock, but not too bad. Once it's weighted down and sitting correctly, I don't think it'll look so absurdly high. After working on element rigs here for a while, I've forgotten how high TRX4 axles sit. I mean, it's a half an inch higher right off the bat. The belly on the VS410 is really quite low. So that's about as low as it'll go. I like the front and rear overhangs. I'm probably going to mark the body right there, and then maybe get onto turning down the outputs on this to get the TRX4 drive shafts to fit. Oh, I can actually pop that open and show you why that doesn't work. I could have sworn I had a spare TRX4 pinion from an axle, but I do not. So on this, obviously they're 5 millimeters, so they'll slide right on. But if we can see the hole, if it will focus enough, it's off by maybe 1/3 of a millimeter. So this hole is too far out. So you can turn this portion down and get this to slide in further, and then it will clear just fine. Then the problem arises in the extra bit of shaft here goes too far in there and presses against the end of the ball for the CVD, and then you have it will go about that far and then just stop, like it binds up together. they really don't like each other. Like TRX4 drive shafts fit on TRX4s. They don't fit on any axial parts. They don't fit on anything unless you machine pretty much everything down. So what I will do is take the output shafts, and I have to take a little bit off of there, about 1.5 millimeters. And then I have to do the same on the end right there. I have to turn the whole thing down, the cover and that. Then, I mean, you still have the issue of Traxxas uses a smaller pin, so the pin wiggles around a little. But that part has never really seemed to be a problem over time. It's just a matter of actual fitment. I do have some axial shafts here, and I've got some element shafts here. But I prefer the Traxxas just because they use so many flutes or spines on their inserts. And because I started with a TRX4 and I have a handful of TRX4s here, I have quite a lot of TRX4 drive shaft parts. I have enough parts to build maybe 2 or 3 more full sets of drive shafts. So I'll get onto that perhaps shortly. Through the magic of video editing, you'll never be able to tell one way or the other. But the goal is to get these fitted. Yeah, that drive shaft angle, it won't be too bad. It's not going to be pretty, and I will have to be very conscious of the angle of that upper link. Like I say, I think, well, I'm sure that these axial, the SCX2 ends are too steep of an angle, so they push the rod end in too much. But none of the links on here are the final links. I will accept maybe steering drag. If there's no interference at full lock, I don't see any need to replace that because, like many other things, I have 4 or 5 of those, and there's quite a few parts that are going to have to be fabricated as is. So I will get to pulling this apart. Oh, and I'll take a quick pit stop to show you the inside of one of these and what's required to actually get it usable. It's only 4 screws to pull this thing apart, which is great. What's not as great, but I understand, is that we have 2, maybe 25 millimeter, one that's slightly shorter, maybe a 22, and then this one is probably an 18. So there's 4 screws and 3 different lengths. I'm not a huge fan of that. So the first thing I do is I find suitable matching black oxide screws, whether they are round head or socket cap or whatever, and I just throw these away because they definitely cheap on the quality of those, and I use one of these and it tends to blow the heads up on these pretty quickly. The second thing I do is I take this gear off of here and I throw it away. I dislike steel spur gears almost as much as I dislike hollow balls. And if you're running some sort of 6S monster, you know, that does 60 miles an hour, sure, put a steel spur in there. But for a crawler, there's absolutely no need. So I will find something, whether it be the stock spur out of an element, whether I buy a spur, whether I replace the whole gear assembly, go with another belt drive, whatever I do, that's not going back in. So pulls apart quite nicely. The dig mechanism it's a Vanquish Dig Mechanism. Now when this guy comes apart, which you can see, this is the first time this has been taken apart, it's bone dry. Like, there's a little bit of assembly lube on there. There are shims all over the place. So when you take it apart, and if you're gonna get one of these QT dig gearboxes, you have to take it apart because it's absolutely bone dry. They are all metal gears. Yes, they are all aluminum gears, and they feel really good. Everything moves smoothly. Also, the steel shielded bearings, these feel better than the first gearbox I put together. The first one, those were equally dry. So I use Liberty oil synthetic. It works fantastic on bearings. And then, of course, it's good old Lucas Red and Tacky for everything else. So I will get that all buttered up after I do the necessary work on this shaft, which is kindly enough, I do have to remove the dig locker. My other one didn't even have the set screw because it's keyed, so it didn't matter. This one is set screwed on there, and that is it's a wee babby. I think it's even smaller than 1.3 millimeter. I do think I found a suitable screw for the other one, so I must have an Allen wrench set or driver that small around here somewhere. But for me, I have to get that part off. For everyone else, you don't. You just glob a bunch of grease in there and slap it back together. So that bearing, it doesn't feel too bad. They're all still going to get lubed anyway. But I got to get... Oh, no, I don't have to do that. I have to do that end and that end. Anyway, I got to take a bunch of stuff apart still. So next time you see that, it'll be done and back together, and it will fit TRX4 drive shafts. During this part, this is an NSFH warning, which is not safe for humans, because I don't know how much grease normal people put inside a gearbox when they build it, but I don't like to take them apart and put them back together frequently, so I put an inhumane amount. So if you can't bear to see this, now would be the time to turn away. Oh, the humanity! One step closer to completion, and it's not getting any warmer. I can no longer feel my fingertips, so I'm going to try to wrap this up. I was not kidding about the hardware that comes with it. Those are the 4 that came out. Been replaced with some nice black oxide. Those go in the trash. Another important note to anyone who has one of these. I noticed that sometimes when dig engages, it's a little clattery. Like it's clattery when it engages, but it's fine when it goes back to 4-wheel drive. So the screws that hold the back of the dig unit in place here at the back are these guys, which I think they look like M3x8 flatheads. Will not focus on anything that small. I replaced them with these, which I believe to be M3x5s, because what was happening is the tip of the screw was coming out of the front of the little dog for the dig mechanism. So when it would get to about here, the screws would catch on the rotating bit, but not enough to give you dig. So it'd be like clackety, 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 and then it would go in. So now it just falls all the way in. Like on my other dig gearbox, which now I get to take apart and do this, the shaft would only get to about there. So dig was never really fully engaging. So you'd get a little slip every now and again. See, all the way to the front, all the way to the back. I mean, there's only 3 teeth on the dog, so it takes a little bit sometimes to get it to lock all the way in. Nice and smooth now. I had to take roughly 2 millimeters off at the end of the shaft. As you can see, there's still plenty of meat on there. It shouldn't be an issue. The TRX4 shafts now fit on with no issue at all. Full range of motion, nice and smooth. And because this has such a big bearing at the front, it just seats down in the hole. I haven't actually tested the fitment on the rear. It looks like the nose of that might still be a little long. I think I have one where the front has already been turned down on that. I will try to dig that out. When I tried to fit TRX4 drive shafts on something else, I will try to dig that out of the bin. But this is already, once again, run far longer than I anticipated. So I am literally just going to switch this off and go in the house and try to find warmth. So thanks for sticking with me through part 2 of this build. I feel like I got some stuff done. It's getting closer. I got the servos and never even took them out of the box, but we're not there yet. And today was supposed to be getting the axles set, and they're partially set. So again, thanks for sticking with me. Oh, one last little note. I did find a steel servo horn and turn that guy down. This guy is 15 millimeters long, so that should definitely be Vanquish approved, as Vanquishes seem to hate any servo horn that isn't Vanquish. Anyway, that all out of the way. Like and subscribe if you feel like it. I don't know. It helps my motivation, I guess. I'd be doing this anyway, but it helps my motivation to film it at the very least. And I hope to keep chugging along because, I mean, this is Southern California, and for some reason it won't stop raining. Like, the crawler course looks like a lake. So, it'll be this for a couple more days at least. Part 3, hopefully get the gearbox mounted, get the drive shaft situated, and then I can start tinkering with mounting all these guys on there. So that's what that'll be, and that'll be soon. So thanks for watching.